Hello, sixth graders. Father Dries here. I have 3 questions that you guys left me, had asked me, submitted back on January 7th. Apologize for taking so long to get to making this video and then posting it. So here we go, though. What do you put in the incense? The incense actually is the little like pellets, sometimes powder, that's put in a thurible. So the thurible, as the little thing goes up and has the chain on it. I swing it. That's called a thurible or an incenser. The little kind of container with the incense is called a boat. Sometimes it's actually in like the shape of a boat. And then the spoon is called, well, spoon. But the incense is placed in the thurible and it burns. It signifies our prayers. The book of Revelation speaks of angels burning incense in heaven, kind of signifying the prayers of God's people. So that's one thing. Next question. The next 2 questions are very related. So the second question here is, if all the other religions of the world, with all the other religions of the world, Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism, and more, if those believers are never exposed to Christianity, do they have a way to go to heaven? Or they're goners? Well, the church says, no, it's possible. Salvation is possible. God offers salvation to all. All right? He desires that all men be saved. And God provides grace for all to be saved. All right? But the ordinary means is through his church. But he can work beyond those ordinary means. And so he can work in the heart, kind of pouring grace into the hearts of a Muslim or someone who's kind of a Hindu. And they aren't saved because they're a Hindu or a Muslim. It's because God's grace is at work in some way in their life, and they're responding, whether or not they know it or not. And so they're responding to the kind of how God's grace is helping enlighten them to make the morally right decisions, and to move forward in seeking the truth. And ultimately, the truth will lead them to the Catholic Church. Now, they may not live long enough to get to that, all right? And so maybe their situation is, but this importance of their heart is ready. Like their heart just desires to keep seeking the truth, is going to continue to pursue. All right, that's, and they're responding to God's grace. The importance of it's not like, well, they're a faithful Buddhist and they're going to get to heaven. They can go to heaven because they're good Buddhists. No. It's because if they're responding to grace. Even Catholics, all right, being a good Catholic, we're responding to grace. The difference between the Buddhist and the Catholic with grace is we have more access to these graces. God has availed us. Kind of all the sacraments, all these different ways of growing in holiness are open to us. That could be open to that person who's a Buddhist if they become aware of it, but God still offers them grace. But for someone to say, well, I don't want this ordinary way, I want to have it my own way, that's where you can cut yourself off. And so God can work beyond the ordinary means that he's established through his church, the sacraments, but those are extraordinary. And there's a certain, you could say, limitedness of those means. They aren't as kind of, there's not as much. All right, it's kind of the access to grace and the grace that God wants to give us to raise up saints are in his church, in his Catholic Church. So we have saints, like live lives heroic sanctity, where any other religion in the world does not have. They may have 1 or 2 people that they kind of hold up like good examples, but Catholicism, look at all the saints, all these men and women who live kind of heroic lives, like wow, and people are just amazed, like. So I think God wants to draw all salvation, but being the Catholic Church, one image that's used is it's a large ship. The bark of Peter sometimes is called, and so I'd rather be in the ship versus kind of out of the ship trying to find my own way across the ocean of this life. All right, just like going across the Atlantic Ocean. I'd rather be in a big ship than kind of like get dropped in the ocean and then like, okay, go in whatever direction. Well, I might go in the wrong direction. Now, other Christians, non-Catholics, they're kind of, the church says they're joined in some way to the Catholic Church. They're not in the boat fully. It's almost like they're on small boats connected to the big boat, even if they don't realize it, like lines that are giving them grace, that God's giving them grace, and they're not even aware of it. And God, wants to draw them in. Okay, let's get in the big boat. All right, there's more here. There's more. There's the fullness. Or a Muslim, kind of one image could be like they're on a raft, all right? And they see the light of where kind of the church kind of has the Lord's presence in it, the Eucharist, the fullness. And so they see that light. There may be some things where they're kind of going the right direction, but also because of our human nature, kind of brokenness and kind of air that gets mixed in there, it may veer. So I think it's possible for someone who's not Catholic. It is possible for someone who's not Catholic to be saved, to make it to heaven. But it's going to be harder because there's going to be more blocks. There's going to be more of these obstacles. And there's not going to be as much, kind of, you could say, graces. Because God, He wants us to get in the boat and so He can fill us up so that others want to be in the boat in the church. He gives grace, offers grace to everyone, but He does offer some grace more to some than others. He offers more grace to those who are in the church than out. He offers more grace to Mary. All right, He made her the mother of God. We don't say, well, that's not fair. Well, no, actually, that's how Jesus came into the world. And so, important. We want to be joyful to draw others into the church. The other question is, if someone doesn't believe in God, can that person be saved? So Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6 says, in order to be saved, you must believe that God exists, must have faith, the importance of faith. In terms of faith, in that sense, that's used there, it says you must believe that God exists and that He is just. All right, so that He's good. All right, so there has to be some sense of there's something, or there's some divine being, and He's good. All right, so now you may say, what if someone grew up in a situation where they were maybe abused, since a young age, and they just have this totally distorted view of reality, of what God is and such. Okay, God can judge the heart. I mean, God does judge the heart. We don't. But this importance, so you have a friend who doesn't believe, maybe you have a friend who just doesn't believe. Maybe that's the question, kind of how you can well, where did that start? It can be, maybe it's like, I had a bad situation, or, there was people that said they were Christian and they just, they were hypocrites. And so how can you speak into that, maybe they had someone like a grandparent passed away and they just kind of God abandoned me. I don't, and so how to be with if a friend or something happens, to listen, and then to help them see it from a different angle. And you don't have to answer right away. Boom, you need an answer. That can be something to ponder, Lord, how should I respond to this friend or this person who doesn't believe because this or that happened? So someone's who said, because I've seen other Christians, they've been bad Christians. Well, I've seen Americans that are not very good, good citizens, Americans. That doesn't mean, well, I don't want to be an American. You look to the best, the ones that actually live it out to the full, not the hypocrites, to see, is this true? Is this real? All right, that's the test. So, let's say that Catholics are this or that. They don't. These Catholics don't. Well, okay, but let's look at the saints. Look at how radically they lived, and how joyful they were, and how many lives they affected. Mother Teresa, just case in point. How many people admire her, kind of, and see wow, she did something marvelous. That little Albanian woman. How many thousands upon thousands, millions of lives that she touched by following Jesus, kind of radically. So yeah, that's I think and to pray, and the importance of prayer, interceding for those who don't believe, and maybe they haven't even been exposed. That's more and more common where people are just well, I just never went to nothing of church ever. It's I've never been. I know he works at another parish I was at, and he works with people entering the church, and he's had teens come in who are interested in the Catholic Church. They've heard things, maybe read stuff, and they're like, come in, like, I've never been in a church before. And he's like, never? Like, they've never been in a church building before, all right? So, like, you got to realize, like, some of those people, like, no exposure. And so just, like, how can you help them? Like, that's going to become more and more common, I think, of people that they don't believe because they just have not been exposed to it. And so how can you be an example and kind of draw others to the Lord? Great question, sixth graders. Just keep them coming. God bless.